Muffins is a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fanfiction series that I wrote as a sequel to the very well-known grimdark Cupcakes by Sergeant Sprinkles. The first time I read Cupcakes was on the Creepypasta wiki, and at the time I was not a fan of My Little Pony at all. In fact, I downright hated it because I expected it to be like the older generations, which I did indeed hate as a child. However, the grimdark definitely sparked an interest, and I began drawing pony fan art despite the fact that I was not a fan. But things changed as I delved more into the show to better understand the story, and even though I do not label myself a Pegasister, I do consider myself a fan of the show. I grew very attached to Pinkie Pie, who, in the show, would never harm her friends, but Cupcakes opened a whole new possibility to the lovable pink party pony. Not to mention that I am a goraholic and love me a good horror story. Then I discovered a very interesting background pony that seemed to have caused a lot of controversy, Derpy. The Pegasus was first going to be called Ditzy-Doo, because in the episode Winter Wrap-Up, a feather-brained Pegasus by that name was mentioned, and Lauren Faust was going to assign the cross-eyed Pegasus's appearance to Ditzy. But after the internet got a hold of her, the fans started referring to her as Derpy Hooves, and Faust liked that name for her. However, the name Derpy is never mentioned on official merchandise, and was only spoken in the show once in the episode The Last Roundup. They said her name as a tip-off to fans, but apparently it caused a lot of controversy, saying Derpy was offensive to people with disabilities. So the scene was altered. Derpy's name was taken out, her eyes were uncrossed, and her voice was changed. After that, Derpy never spoke again, but her appearance retains the crossed eyes we know and love. Because of her name and appearance, fans have made her a bit special, meaning her personality in fanfictions usually shows a mild or even major hint toward a learning disability, though the word derp does not mean retarded, and I'm sure Hasbro did not intend to cause harm. Another popular fanon with Derpy is that she likes muffins, which sparked the idea of a Cupcakes-type story. The very first Muffin story I wrote was posted to DeviantArt on June 30th, 2013, and it got an overwhelming response. The reason I decided to make it a sequel to Cupcakes was because I wanted to preserve the original story and not just make a cheap knockoff. I figured Derpy was a good candidate for Pinkie's new partner because of the fact that she has been treated so unfairly both in the show and outside of it. In the series, Derpy's past is based solely on the fanfiction Bubbles, which is a very sad story explaining how her mother was battling depression and also seemed ashamed that she had given birth to a mentally handicapped filly. In the story, it is told from Derpy's point of view, but it is very clear that Derpy's mother keeps attempting to poison her, obviously trying to kill her. Derpy's father, however, is very loving and supportive of his daughter, and fights with the mother very frequently. The story ends with Derpy's mother taking Derpy very far from her home, teaching her how to blow bubbles, and, while the filly is distracted, leaves her behind. The story actually ends before Derpy fully realizes that she is alone. It is inferred in the story that this is when Derpy gets her cutie mark, but doesn't realize it. And though that's where the story ends, I have expanded on how Derpy ventured to Ponyville through side stories and flashbacks in the Muffin series. Derpy's life gets a little harder as time goes on, and she is very lonely, but eventually meets Pinkie Pie and becomes good friends. The great thing about Derpy is, she isn't stupid. She has some issues here and there, and she's very childish, but she knows what she's doing, and she thinks it's fun. Writing Derpy as a murderer has given her a chance to get revenge on a world that initially shunned her for being a little different. However, at the time I wrote the first story in the series, I was also working on a comic made out of vectors called Pinkie's Party. The vectors were not ones I drew myself, because that was before I knew how to use Inkscape, but instead I used stock vectors provided by people on DeviantArt who made them for resource purposes. The comic was very similar to Cupcakes, but instead of just having Rainbow Dash, Pinkie had chained up all 5 of her friends to make into yummy pastries. The comic for Pinkie's Party only has 8 existing pages, and I will not be continuing it, and here's why. The comic actually helped progress Muffins into what it is today. The fates of the main 6 in the comic match the fates that they met in Muffins, including the methods of torture and how they were murdered, or in the case of Twilight and Fluttershy, how they survived. The end of Pinky's party was that Pinkie Pie got arrested, but later, Derpy and Apple Bloom break her out. So, in a way, the comic was an early version of the Muffins series entirely. But the series itself grew much bigger than I had intended, for I introduced 3 more characters, Pinkie Pie's sisters. I will expand on that another time. As for now, thank you for watching! Don't forget to check out the new playlist on my channel called Muffins Behind the Scenes, where I will be posting background information on the series, as well as some other goodies. Lastly, make sure to subscribe, spread the word of awesome, and become a Reitannite, and I shall see you later, alligators and crocodiles. Goodbye!